My wife of 9 years, Agnes, is a very stunning woman. Bright eyes, bright white smile with perfect teeth, the perfect facial features of a Western European woman, long blonde hair, and petite tall body. She was born in Norway and raised there until her parents moved to the United States when she was 13. We married when she was 21. I had just sat for my oral boards and was about to become a licensed physician. I was 30. I met Agnes when she was attending the college that I was doing graduate studies at and was a graduate assistant, teaching one of her anatomy classes. She was the best-looking girl on campus, the most sought after, being European, very popular. She thought nothing of having sex with a different man every week or month, and she routinely bedded the best-looking women. It was like a Frenchman drinking wine, part of the culture for her. I left the employ of the college when I began my 2-year residency program, so I decided to ask Agnes to dinner, now that she was no longer one of my students. She liked me. We had gotten along famously, and she readily accepted my invitation. I am tall and told that I'm good-looking, sandy hair and green eyes, broad at the shoulder and narrow at the hip, and I was going to be a doctor. After dinner, going to bed was the accepted dating protocol in Agnes's mind, and she expected me to seduce her. However, me being a soon-to-be physician, I was loath to have sex with her yet, because of the risk of her being the home to various creatures that might bite me or kill me. I discussed this with Agnes, deferring to have sex with her until I was sure she was disease-free, much to her consternation and, ultimately, alarm. We spent that first evening, when she'd normally be having her romp, me educating her about venereal disease, showing her pictures of advanced cases of all sorts of possible nightmare infections that she could be carrying or could get if she continued living a promiscuous lifestyle. To my great surprise and pleasure, Agnes became celibate. She asked me all sorts of questions about possible treatments for this or that, how long would it take for her to be celibate to know for sure if she was disease-free, how the different diseases affected childbearing. Lots of questions. Agnes had truly become alarmed and had decided to turn over a new leaf in her life. Because it was me who had opened her eyes, helping her to avoid a shortened life due to disease, or a life fraught with pain and frightening medical treatments, Agnes linked her heart to me. We became friends. I helped her with her schooling and she me with mine. We latched onto one another and love bloomed. Fortunately, Agnes had avoided the scourge of sexually transmitted diseases of any sort, and, after several months, we consummated our commitment to one another. We were married a week after I'd become a licensed physician. My specialty was gynecology. I began practice in an office with 12 other physicians, all of us specialists. Agnes and I were ecstatically happy in those first years. She was a truly open-minded, so everything was a go, and she often initiated it on her own. After our 8th year of marriage, we had leveled out. Our sex lives were down to about 4 times per week, but usually one of those times would be 4 or 5 hours in length. So, while we weren't as active as at first, we were still very active and very much in love, I thought. Her appetite was still high, but my stamina was waning as I neared my 40th year. As a physician, I know that if we are both disease-free from the start and our fidelity remains intact, along with practicing excellent hygiene, we should never have to worry about sexual disease. I had been totally faithful to Agnes during our marriage. Indeed, way before our marriage ever took place, I made up my mind that Agnes was the girl for me and swore off other women. When Agnes became celibate, so did I, in anticipation of joining with her in a rebirth of wonderful new sex in a day to come. That was almost 9 years earlier. Approaching our 9th anniversary, while using the restroom early one morning in my office, I noticed a small, painless chancre, or sore, on the underside of my genitals. I realized that I had become infected with the bacterial, sexually transmitted disease known as primary syphilis. I tested myself for that, and it came back positive. Since I caught it in its very earliest stage, it was easily treated with 1 shot of penicillin, which I self-injected. Syphilis is easily non-detectable to both men and women, but being a physician, when I noticed the small open sore, I checked. I was somewhere between furious, vengeful, and very sad. This was nothing to play with, yet I could have my vengeance on Agnes and on her host of lovers by simply saying nothing to her or them. Ultimately, the disease would ravage their lives in its end stages. It could render them blind, impotent, barren, and even kill. But it would also ravage all those spouses and innocent others who would get hit by this moving train. My disease donor had to have been my wife, Agnes. She was back on the lover treadmill. I work long hours and have regular times when I'm away from home, and she knows these times, these hours. It would be very difficult to avoid sexual relations with her. I had to figure out some way to ensure her fidelity. If I forgave her and treated her and her lovers for their infidelity, as a physician is wont to do. I decided neither to take my vengeance nor to forgive her. My decision was going to change her, and everyone's life who involved themselves sexually with her and their loved ones, too. I informed our office manager and my own personal assistant that I needed the rest of the day off. I asked one of my partners to see my more seriously ill patients, working them into their queues, and we'd reschedule the rest. I headed off for home at 9:30 a.m. In our more than 8 years of marriage, I'd never once been home between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. when the office was open. Today would be a surprise. I parked on the street, not being able to get in the driveway with the 3 cars that were already there. I walked over to the cars, took down the license plate numbers, tried their doors, and every single car was unlocked. I reconnoitered a wealth of information from each of the cars and put it in the trunk of my car for later. Then, I used my key, walked in the front door, and stopped to listen. They were using the downstairs recreation room. This would be easy. There were no windows, and there was only one way out of that room, through this upstairs door. I went into the master bedroom, retrieved my Springfield XDM.40 S&W pistol with a 16-round magazine and 2 extra-loaded magazines. The .40 caliber pistol makes a very, very loud noise when fired indoors. It also is a lethal weapon and will destroy any flesh that the bullet fired from such a weapon hits. I reasoned that, I am a physician, I make my living using my hands and have no desire to use these instruments of my livelihood to smash into the bones of another man's face, or to risk injury to my own self, beyond the dose of syphilis that I already was enjoying. Downstairs, in my basement recreation room, were 4 naked people. One of them was the lovely 30-year-old Agnes, my wife of nearly 9 years. One was Jake Nolan, the husband of one of my partners. She was actually the one covering for me today, as it turned out she is also a gynecologist. Another one of Agnes's guests was Mark Henderson, the attorney that our medical clinic had on retainer for business purposes. The last man in our basement was our business banker, Ken Kowalski Jr. Wow, a bonanza. I crept down the stairs unnoticed and observed Agnes being screwed by Ken Kowalski. Mark Henderson and Jake Nolan was waiting for their turn patiently. When I rounded the stairs at the bottom, only Henderson was facing me, but his eyes were closed. Everyone had piled their clothes on the end of the sofa, right by the doorway to the stairs, together. So I picked them all up and wadded them under my arm, holding out my pistol, pointing it at the bathroom to my right. I fired off 3 rapid rounds from that .40 caliber pistol, and it was so loud it hurt. Everyone jumped, their eyes as big as saucers, mouths open, and then everyone hit the deck. There was 4 naked bodies trying to get small laying on the floor of my basement, looking at me with great fear and surprise. Agnes saw me and said, "Oh no, Bill." I said, "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I am all out of bubblegum." I always fantasized if I could ever say that line. Jake Nolan, the doctor's husband, got up and started for me to take his clothes away from me. I fired a round just over his head into the ceiling. It must have been so loud. He fell just as though I'd shot him, grabbing his ears and crying out in fear. I said, "You all probably have syphilis. Agnes, you do for sure." Not waiting for their reaction, I said, "I'm going upstairs with your clothes. I am calling the county health department and your wives. I'll use your cell phones to call your wives. The county health will want to interview you about treatment and your other sexual partners. You'll wait downstairs until your wife and a county health officer come down and get you one at a time. You need to just wait your turn. Agnes, you and I are done. I've explained all this to you once before, and now you get to see how it goes," I said, addressing her separately. "Hear me, you scumsucker. I am going to block your exit from this basement. If you try to leave here, you will have to go through me, and you won't survive this." Agnes slumped in the far corner of the room, crying into her hands, "Oh, no. Oh, Bill, no, please." I retreated with all their clothing up the stairs and shut the door. I put a kitchen chair against the door, wedging the back of the chair against the door handle. Then I began rifling through pockets and making calls. The police showed up with the health department workers, and one by one the wives arrived. The police disarmed me, took my statement, and then handcuffed me and took me into custody, arresting me for discharging a firearm in the city, endangering the lives of 4 people, and unlawful imprisonment. I had serious charges leveled against me, indeed. I did have a full and complete chance to talk with health officials, explaining in detail what my part in all this was. It became a crisis, because Agnes had had sex with so many different men in our town over the past 2 months, as I found out later. She had to give up all their names, and they were all tracked down for treatment. In addition, they had to be interviewed and their sexual partners treated and interviewed, and so on until everyone who could be contaminated was tested and treated. The divorce courts were hopping around our area. The price of penicillin went up, around our part of the world, too. Actually, the fact that I had caught my own infection probably saved a lot of misery, because the proactive work done on the part of the state, even the feds came in, reduced the further infection of lots of folks, ultimately. Still, it was a massive undertaking, and all from just one woman, and who knows where she got it. Criminal charges were filed against me, and I was imprisoned for 1 year and 6 months. I was out in 6 months because of prison overcrowding and good behavior. While I was in county lockup, my lawyers were suing the medical practice's lawyer, banker, and the other doctor's husband, using the information from the trunk of my car as a starting point for information about them all. No action was taken by Agnes on a divorce petition, so we were still married when I was released, but I'd had no contact and did not know where she was. We'd lost our home, our cars, and all our savings hiring attorneys to defend me, and in the dissolution of the medical practices. I'd lost my license to practice medicine, but could be reinstated with full hearings, since what I did was not about any malpractice issue, and since nobody was hurt and it was a crime of passion, not malfeasance. I'd need anger management classes, some refresher courses, and to let them lecture me ad nauseum, but it was possible to become a practicing physician again, under the tutelage of a proven more senior physician for 5 years, if I played my cards right. But I still had the civil lawsuits working that I'd brought, and it looked like they'd be bearing fruit before long. My lawyer was going for the gold. We, my lawyer and I, struck gold. Both the bank and the law firm yielded several millions of dollars, because we were able to show that my lost income for life as a physician was so substantial that it warranted a big settlement. Additionally, they paid for breach of trust, estrangement between my wife and I, and fiduciary malfeasance. Since I'd heard nothing from or about Agnes after I was arrested and taken to county lockup, I filed for divorce because of abandonment against Agnes and was granted a divorce after I'd been out of prison for 1 year. About 3 years after I'd settled the lawsuits, gotten my divorce, been reinstated as a licensed physician under the watchful eye of Dr. Maria Nolan, former wife of Jake Nolan, who was one of my wife's lovers that day in my basement. I had a late-in-the-day appointment with a woman I'd never seen before. The record said, Ms. A. Oravane, age 34, complaining of vaginal dryness, recurring yeast infections, and discomfort in her female areas. My assistant showed her to exam room C, took her vitals, discussed generally what she needed to see the doctor about, and left the patient, telling me she was ready. I opened the woman's chart, began reading it as I opened the door to the room, and there stood Agnes, my estranged wife of almost 5 years. "Hello, Bill, my love," Agnes said. "What is this, Agnes?" I asked. "I wanted to see you, to explain, to see if we can rekindle our love. We are still married, you know, so anything is possible," she coyly remarked. "No deal, Agnes. You are a walking death trap. Besides, we aren't married. You abandoned me and I filed for divorce. We are decreed by a state district court to be lawfully divorced." I informed her. "I went to jail. I suffered humiliation before the community and lost my license with the state medical board to practice medicine. You are incorrigible, not insatiable. Our differing moral codes totally make us non-compatible," I said. "But Bill, I am having some medical problems in my female area and I need a doctor." "Nope, not here, Agnes. There's no charge for this visit, but do not come back. If you are having female issues, see another physician, not me. You Americans, you are so uptight about everything. A little sex is good for the soul. It is therapy for life's obstacles. Why don't you loosen up? They have drugs for all these diseases nowadays." She snorted. "Agnes, if you cannot find your own way out, our security officer would be glad to assist you. Get out and stay out." I snorted right back. That was the last I saw of Agnes. Though my heart was knit to hers from the early years of our relationship, my head told me clearly that she's trouble. I've seen so many really ugly end results from sexual overindulgence, promiscuity, and sexual abuse that I don't care to be a part of that cycle anymore. Maria Nolan and I have taken our relationship to a higher level. She has been without the services of a man for 5 years, herself. We have been exploring one another's anatomical irregularities of late. I've examined her thoroughly and have found it necessary to insert certain instruments to ascertain her fitness for male cohabitation. She, of course, also has had to be on her toes, what with being responsible to the state medical board for my conduct as a physician. She has to administer testing and regular disciplinary procedures against me to keep me fit for service as a doctor. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.